Okay, and we're going to now continue with the Dalbert motion to exclude the testimony of Dina Mayzlin. Okay, so this is I keep referring to her as a digital expert. So she is the person to basically give expert testimony on the online conversations, the smear campaign, the digital campaign, etc. The court should exclude the testimony of Dina Mayzlin. Dina Mayzlin opines that the defendants manipulated online conversations concerning Lively to damage her reputation, and that such manipulation caused the sales of Lively's consumer products to decline. Mayzlin's opinions are baseless and fail virtually every requirement for admitting expert testimony. It is difficult to overstate the flaws in her methodology, which she has never previously applied and appears to have concocted solely for the purposes of this litigation. Ow. With respect to causation, Mayzlin's approach is thoroughly unscientific and, to make matters worse, depends on a notoriously unreliable artificial intelligence model to analyze the data. The shortcomings in Mayzlin's techniques force her to fill gaps with speculation and guesswork, as well as to make summation-style arguments based on her interpretation of particular documents without the application of any particular expertise. Her analysis is unreliable every step of the way, and it should be excluded in full. At a minimum, Mayzlin should not be permitted to summarize and interpret emails and other case documents for the jury. Mayzlin should not be allowed to opine that defendants manipulated online sentiment. Mayzlin's manipulation opinion. Okay. Mayzlin first opines that defendants launched an online smear campaign beginning in August 2024 that caused a massive spike in the volume of online conversations about Lively and in the percentage of such conversations that were negative. I think I've done a video on this report as well, so I will link that too. I'll put that in the video description like I did with Jennifer Frades. As a touchstone for her analysis, Mayzlin asked ChatGPT's artificial intelligence model to categorize a sample of social media posts from May 2024 to February 2025, according to their sentiment toward Lively: positive, neutral, negative, or mixed. Relying largely on this AI-based delineation, Mayzlin concludes that the volume of social media posts spiked and became increasingly negative in August 2024 and again in December 2024. Mayzlin also asked the ChatGPT model to count how many of the negative posts about Lively reflect themes that also purportedly appear in defendant's plan scenario document. Just ChatGPT. Based on the ChatGPT model's response, Mayzlin determined that although certain themes appeared on social media before August 2024, they appeared more frequently starting in August 2024. Less than 4% of negative posts, and a bit more starting in January 2025, roughly 10% of negative posts. Mayzlin performed the same AI-based exercise with topics from 2 Daily Mail articles that defendants supposedly planted in mid-August 2024, and she received similar results. Based on the results of the AI-driven surveys, Mayzlin claims to have found redacted. How did Mayzlin rule out possible alternative causes? In her report, Mayzlin merely says, "It's my understanding that there are no other significant external events during this time that could reasonably explain the observed shift in public sentiment." Really? Not even Lively's own interviews? As support for her understanding, Mayzlin cites a single source: her discussions with management of Lively's consumer brands. On this basis, Mayzlin concludes that given the absence of alternative external events that could explain this change and the close alignment between the rise in unfavorable conversations and the documented campaign timeline, it is reasonable to infer that the manipulation of online conversations was the catalyst. Mayzlin's opinion is not grounded in any expertise or actual methodology. Mayzlin's reasoning falls far short of what the federal rules require from testifying experts. A causation opinion based solely on a temporal relationship is not derived from the scientific method and is therefore insufficient to satisfy the requirements. One cannot determine whether something caused an observed effect without controlling for other equally plausible causes of that effect. Thus, reliable expert testimony must at least address obvious alternative causes and provide a reasonable explanation for dismissing them. Mayzlin relies solely on the close alignment in time between the August 2024 increase in online conversations and negative posts and defendant's purported campaign. She fails to address any alternative causes, let alone explain them away. Her vague assertion that discussions with management ruled out other causes does not suffice. Assumptions based on conclusory statements of the expert's client rather than on the expert's independent evaluation are not reasonable. And then she quotes a case here. I asked the client and the client couldn't think of anything. Is not the application of science and is wholly inadequate for a causation opinion. Of course, there were plenty of other reasons why more people would be talking about Lively in the second week of August, and why some of those online conversations may have been negative. Lively was the star of a major Hollywood movie that premiered on August 6th and was released to the public on August 9th with massive success. People talk about movies at the time they are released. It is hardly surprising that people online were talking about Lively in the days and weeks that followed the premiere. And as everyone knows, much online discourse is negative. Much online discourse is negative, often with no rhyme or reason, except the desire to take the successful down a notch. Mayzlin herself appeared to recognize this at her deposition, which is redacted. But also, just in motion and limine, Lively herself also has recognized this as well, because she wants her wealth precluded from being, presented to the jury because she perceives there may be a bias against wealthy people. There is also significant evidence that Lively's own actions in July and August of 2024 caused a massive outpouring of vitriol online. These actions include Lively's deliberate and highly visible efforts to ostracize Baldoni by persuading cast members to unfollow him on social media, which touched off frenzied press speculation about a celebrity feud. They also include Lively's decision to cross-promote a serious film about domestic violence with her hair care brand, alcoholic beverages, and her husband's superhero movie. Lively herself recognized this, as did multiple Sony executives. Then something's redacted. It is inexplicable that Mayzlin chose to ignore these alternative explanations in her report and pretend they do not exist. Lively cannot fill that gap with Mayzlin's deposition testimony, and in fact, Mayzlin's deposition laid bare the defects in her analysis. When asked whether she considered alternative causes, Mayzlin responded, redacted. As Mayzlin was well aware, however, the film premiere and the launch of Lively's hair care brand both took place in early August 2024. Mayzlin evidently failed to consider the impact of these events, or the impact of any of Lively's other actions discussed above. She simply judged it redacted. Mayzlin's testimony is neither based on sufficient facts or data, nor a reliable application of her principles and methods to the facts of the case. Mayzlin fared no better when pressed about specific alternative causes at her deposition. Confronted with text messages in which Sony executives attributed the online backlash to Lively's own steps, Mayzlin gave the non-response that redacted. When asked about the possible effect of Lively telling her co-stars to unfollow Baldoni, Mayzlin gave her subjective judgment that redacted. Mayzlin repeatedly returned to her argument that redacted. But this sort of reasoning, comparing the contents of simple documents, weighing probable explanations and drawing inferences, does not involve the application of any expertise. A party may not present an expert to make simple inferences drawn from uncomplicated facts, which does not help the jury and serves only to buttress the plaintiff's case. Such an expert improperly supplants the role of counsel in making argument at trial and the role of the jury in interpreting the evidence, and must be excluded. And it is equally possible that the authors of the scenario planning document and the online commentators were both focused on Lively's obvious weaknesses because they were obvious weaknesses. Yeah, exactly. Everyone online who was watching was like horrified, but also Wayfarer watching were horrified, and Sony executives did say, they said that too. To make matters worse, Mayzlin ignores the strong evidence of organic negative sentiment against Lively in her own dataset, which undermines her theory that defendants caused a social media backlash against Lively. From May to July 2024, there were many criticisms of Lively on social media that Mayzlin does not attribute to defendants, and which simply took off in August 2024. Consider the criticism of Lively's wedding on a slave plantation and antebellum-themed lifestyle blog. Mayzlin's backup data contains over 270 negative social media posts containing the words plantation, antebellum, or racist from May to July 2024, and over 10,000 in or after August 2024. I'm just going to read that footnote here. For example, May 1st, Taylor Swift is friends with tons of racists. Blake Lively got, this must be a comment online. Blake Lively got married on a plantation. May 6th, she defended her plantation wedding for years. She's not that cool. May 6th, she and Ryan got married in a slave plantation. They apologized after receiving backlash. And then she created a lifestyle website that glorified and romanticized the antebellum South, aka the plantation era driven by slave labor. She has not apologized despite the backlash. July 9th, she also had a blog called Preserve with published articles titled things like The Allure of the Antebellum. Interesting how a white woman who's never lived in the South has such a strong pull to the pre-Civil War South. Ouch. So, and they continue, that topic alone was more popular than any of the themes that Mayzlin attributes to defendants. Posts criticizing Lively for supporting Woody Allen and bullying Kate Middleton that appeared in the months before August 2024 and then took off. Is there a... I'm not going to read them all, but at least 13 negative posts in May to July 2024 mention Woody Allen. I don't like Blake Lively much either because she defended working with Woody Allen and called him very empowering. Farrow literally outed him as a pedo with that op-ed in 2014 that was widely talked about. I don't want to hear any bullshit excuses about how Blake didn't know. Over 3,900 negative posts mentioned Woody in or after August 2024. And then at least 37 negative posts in May to July 2024 mentioned Lively's bullying of Kate Middleton. Yeah, and that pissed me off as well, by the way. Nobody speaks about my princess like that. Blake Lively, the nasty lady that made horrible comment about Princess Catherine who had cancer. I used to like Blake until she jumped on the Where's Kate bandwagon. She really is a mean girl. Who knew Blake enjoyed bullying women with cancer? Over 1,500 negative posts mention Middleton or cancer in or after August 2024. Mayzlin does not claim that defendants planted or promoted these topics. These are just a few examples, and there are surely more. Mayzlin does not make any effort to address this evidence in her report, even though it is highly relevant to her conclusion, and thus exclusion of the proffered testimony is warranted. At her deposition, Mayzlin admitted that the overwhelming majority of negative conversations online about Blake Lively did not fit defendants' purported themes. She claimed this was probably because defendants' actions inspired other trolls or haters of Lively to resurface other negative stories. Mayzlin admitted that she can't tell what percentage of the conversations were manipulated, but insisted the wave of negative sentiment wouldn't have happened unless the Wayfarer team got the ball rolling and lit the match that then burned the forest. All of this is speculation, not the rigorous analysis required of an expert. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Mayzlin acknowledges, for instance, that defendants did not generate the spike of negative posts in December 2024. Rather, the lawsuits filed at that time brought renewed attention to the parties' dispute, and Lively herself and the same kind of topics came up again. But why was the spike in August 2024 any different? How can Mayzlin rule out that Lively's own missteps or the release of a film in which Lively played a starring role renewed attention to past controversies and lit the match that then burned the forest? Mayzlin has no answer. She simply dismisses this explanation as redacted. In short, Mayzlin's explanations and underlying causal analysis appear to be either merely off-the-cuff surmises or common-sense explanations untethered to any actual expertise. She merely offers a particular interpretation of the evidence and does no more than counsel for plaintiff will do in argument to the jury. But a party may not use expert testimony to provide itself with an additional summation by having the expert interpret the evidence. And where, as here, an expert's analysis is simply inadequate to support the conclusions reached, Rule 702 mandates its exclusion. Mayzlin should not be permitted to opine that defendants manipulated online conversations, let alone caused an online conflagration. Mayzlin's purported methodology is untested and fundamentally unreliable. Mayzlin resorts to logical leaps and speculation because her methodology leaves no other choice. It was concocted for this litigation alone, without the thoroughness and care that one would ordinarily expect for causal analysis. The district court, however, must make certain that an expert employs in the courtroom the same level of intellectual rigor that characterizes the practice of an expert in the relevant field. Mayzlin's analysis falls well short of that standard and must be excluded. Okay, so she's a marketing expert. Okay. Mayzlin, a professor of marketing, describes herself as a redacted. She claims that redacted. But when asked for more details about these methods, she backpedaled, explaining that she has redacted. She admitted that redacted when asked if her redacted. This would be a good moment to market my redacted t-shirt. If this sounds like Mayzlin is straining hard to anchor her expert report in the academic literature, that is because she is. It's true that Mayzlin's report contains citations to a paper she published in the American Economic Review. Like Mayzlin's report, the objective of her AER paper is to study fake online commentary. In that case, online hotel reviews. But the similarities end there. The two works might share the same goal, but they do not share a methodology. The AER paper uses a statistical approach based on the premise that hotel reviews on Expedia are hard to fake, since only verified customers can leave reviews, while hotel reviews on TripAdvisor are easy to fake, since anyone can leave reviews. The paper hypothesizes that small independent hotels are more likely to give themselves fake positive reviews and give neighboring hotels fake negative reviews. The paper tests this hypothesis by assessing the relationship between a hotel's characteristics, size, neighbors, etc., on the one hand, and the difference between that hotel's TripAdvisor and Expedia ratings on the other, using a differences in differences regression analysis. The paper also contains several pages of robustness checks to test alternative explanations for the results. In other words, as with most scientific work, the AER methodology contains assumptions and controls which are made explicit so that others in the scientific community can evaluate the research yield accordingly. Mayzlin's expert report in this case contains virtually none of these features. There are no robustness checks or formal statistical methods. The key feature of the AER paper is lacking, namely the ability to set a benchmark for genuine reviews by comparing two different review platforms with dramatically different costs of cheating. Mayzlin's expert work might resemble the AER paper if she had compared two social media platforms with dramatically different safeguards against manipulation before and after the beginning of August 2024. But that is not what Mayzlin did. Instead, she performed a simple comparison of sentiment and discussion topics over time with no apparent precedent in the literature and no evaluation of alternative causes. Her ersatz methodology was devised for this litigation only. The lack of controls makes that methodology inherently suspect. Ooh. The wide gulf between Mayzlin's academic work and her expert work is fatal to the admissibility of her testimony. Mayzlin does not employ the same level of intellectual rigor that characterizes the practice of an expert in her field. Her methodology lacks any firm foundation in the literature she cited, and no other indicia of reliability are present, since that methodology has not been tested and has not been subjected to peer review and publication, does not have a known potential rate of error, and has not gained general acceptance in the relevant scientific community. Rule 702 therefore mandates the exclusion of her testimony, which is based on data, a methodology, and studies that are simply inadequate to support the conclusions reached. Mayzlin's reliance on ChatGPT's AI model to evaluate and classify her data destroys the reliability of her opinions. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I agree. I agree. Didn't Kim Kardashian just recently fail the bar because she used ChatGPT or some AI thing? Just, it's the one thing we are taught is use proper case databases, books, etc. Proper authenticated sources. Do not Google search. Do not use AI. It's not reliable. And it says so as well. Okay. Mayzlin's testimony must also be excluded for an entirely independent reason. Her opinion relies on data that was evaluated and classified by GPT-4o, which is the LLM model that supports ChatGPT. Mayzlin relied on GPT-4o to classify social media posts according to sentiment and to identify the posts that reflect certain themes. This is a key step in her analysis and an essential foundation for her opinion. If GPT-4o cannot be relied upon to perform this task correctly, all the conclusions she draws are unreliable. Courts in this district and around the country have found that artificial intelligence models like GPT-4o cannot be relied on to synthesize information correctly, including for expert analysis. Academic publications and online commentary also cast doubt on the use of these tools for serious analytical purposes. One medical paper, which tested the ability of GPT-4o to generate short literature reviews, found that nearly 2/3 of citations included by GPT-4o were fabricated or inaccurate. Just as alarming is the OpenAI Developer Community Forum, which contains a web page entitled GPT-4o Not Following Simple and Clear Instructions. There, GPT-4o users report various problems with the model. I'm asking GPT-4o to write a paragraph between 400 and 500 words. It will not follow this instruction and wrote the first paragraph with 635 words. I ask it to do it again with a word count between 400 and 500, and it proceeds to send an almost identical paragraph and tell me it is 499 words, when in reality it is 621. I've ran multiple tests and confirmed that the issue isn't with my prompts either. GPT-4o consistently fails to adhere to specific instructions, much like how you described. ChatGPT-4o is the worst model in following any kind of instructions. It just says what it wants to say. There are strong reasons to believe that GPT-4o was equally unreliable when Mayzlin asked it to identify and categorize social media posts. Nope, here we go. Although GPT-4o classified 361,050 posts as expressing negative sentiment toward Lively, many of these posts do nothing of the sort. Thousands of misclassified posts do little more than report that Lively filed this lawsuit. Oh dear. 1,845 posts/reposts. Retweet discussing film. Blake Lively has reportedly filed a lawsuit against the Enzo's co-star and director Justin Baldoni for sexual harassment and launching a smear campaign against her. 908 reposts. Blake Lively has filed a lawsuit against Justin Baldoni, accusing him of sexual harassment and a coordinated effort to destroy her reputation. 48 reposts. Justin Baldoni has been dropped by his talent agency, WME. This follows after Blake Lively filed a lawsuit against Baldoni for sexual harassment and launching a smear campaign against her following the release of the It Ends With Us film. In addition, many posts misclassified as negative appear to express positive sentiment toward Lively and come to her defense. For instance, 417 reposts, the unmasking of Baldoni crisis management / media campaign to destroy Blake Lively makes me crave the unmasking of the campaign to destroy Meghan Markle and who is behind it. Meghan Markle is behind the campaign to destroy Meghan Markle. Just saying. The same as Blake Lively. But yeah, that's clearly not negative to Lively. 40 reposts. Justin Baldoni sexually harassed Blake Lively and then retaliated to ruin her life. He hired Johnny Depp's PR firm to destroy Blake's reputation because she voiced her concerns publicly. This PR firm destroyed Amber Heard's reputation when she was fighting defamation. 35 posts and reposts. It was always an open secret that Justin Baldoni was creepy toward Blake Lively on set. The rest of the cast had unfollowed Justin for a reason. Yes, because Blake Lively asked them to. But of course, film, I don't know what that means, wanted to defend their favourite white man. What's his race got to do with it? She's white too. But of course, film wanted to defend their favourite white man, so they assisted him in his campaign to destroy Blake's reputation. I don't understand. I'm sorry, a personal opinion here, right? And I mean this really nicely, but I don't understand why people bring in race where it is not needed to be brought in, right? But honestly, they're framing that as, the way they're saying favorite white man, like it is he a racist or something? And they're doing so to defend a known racist. That's the bit that, like, just completely sends me. I don't get it. Maybe someone can explain it to me, 'cause it just doesn't sound, it's like, what are we doing here? There's no allegation that he has sexually harassed, you know, a black woman or a Latino woman, other than Blake Lively's claims that she's part Cherokee, which are they've been called into question, shall we say. She's provided no evidence of that, and they are seriously called into question. In fact, there's evidence that it's not true. This is just a small selection of samples. Defense counsel have identified many more, and undoubtedly a large number are yet to be discovered. It is impossible to know more egregious errors of GPT 4.0 made in classifying the that Mayzlin fed into the model. Mayzlin had a pair of reviewers to double check only a minuscule sample of 300 posts for sentiment and themes. This is insufficient to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that GPT 4.0's classifications were reliable, or that they would be helpful to the jury and not unduly prejudicial. All the more so because, as explained by defendants expert Nicole Alexander, Mayzlin's use of GPT 4.0 suffered from serious methodological flaws, including Mayzlin's failure to disclose the model's settings, failure to disclose the testing and refinement of her prompts, failure to account for well-known LLM limitations, and exclusive reliance on a single LLM without testing alternatives. Right, I am gonna just say here, because they mentioned Nicole Alexander, who's Wayfarer experts. I did a very long series on that. There was like about 10 or 11 videos. It was long because her entire deposition transcript was unsealed. So I did a read through. I was incredibly critical of her. Now, I haven't read her report, and her report may be great. So I do reserve kind of, my position that I'm open very much to changing my opinion on Nicole Alexander as an expert. My problem is, though, she did not perform particularly well in the questioning in her deposition. And that is going to be a problem at trial, because the deposition is as close as you're going to get to like a practice run of a trial. But it's just you haven't got the pressure of actually, this is the real thing. You're in the courtroom, you're in front of the judge, you're in front of all of the parties, the counsel, the jury, as well as members of the public. So my worry is that if she was and she was struggling to deal with her deposition, she was absolutely struggling. I haven't seen Mayzlin's deposition, though. She may well have struggled just as much. But hopefully she will, if Nicole Alexander is a good expert witness and her report is good, which I have not read yet, then hopefully Wayfarer will help her to fine tune how she performs at trial. But I mean, her deposition didn't make me think that she would be convincing as an expert. But I'm saying that just giving my in the moment opinion. Dina Mayzlin may also have performed terribly, and it sounds like she did. From although they're redacted, Wayfarer are saying, well, she couldn't do this and she couldn't say that and she couldn't back up this, and the tools that she used, the methods are, they're flawed. They were concocted just for this litigation. These are all big problems, actually. And if she's using Chat GPT and Wayfarer is going, look, literally, look at all these problems. Look how unreliable it is. And they're saying, well, now that makes all of your report unreliable, then that's a problem. But I may change my mind on Nicole Alexander. I will have a look at her report if and when it becomes available. It may be, but I haven't. It may be now actually, but I haven't got to that yet. In short, Mayzlin relies. I'm not reading all of these notes, by the way, just the ones that were funny. In short, Mayzlin relies on a black box of GPT-4o processes, the inner details of which have not been disclosed. She thus relies on methodology that, among other flaws, is for the most part unarticulated and unknown. That is unacceptable for any expert. Mayzlin's testimony should be excluded in its entirety. Mayzlin's opinion relies on social media posts this court has held do not qualify as retaliation. Because obviously now we have got the summary judgment, and the judge did say, well, no, that wouldn't meet the threshold for sexual harassment. That wouldn't. And likewise, he applied the same thing to some of the statements and social media posts that Lively was saying was retaliation. Judge Lyman actually said, actually, no, that's not. They're defending themselves. They're allowed to do that. Which is going to go against Jennifer Freud's opinion that, defending yourself is Darvo. The court's ruling on summary judgment underscores another fatal flaw in Mayzlin's methodology. Her analysis relies on social media posts that are not actionable as retaliation and are therefore irrelevant to Lively's surviving claims. Among other things, the court noted several categories of reasonable response by defendants outside the bounds of actionable conduct, including the right to use proxies, both disclosed and undisclosed, to defend themselves and the right to assert that Lively could not be credited, including by elevating stories that would cast doubt and pointing to evidence that Lively had ulterior motives for making the claims of harassment. Mayzlin undertook, however, to have GPT-4o classify posts and stories containing these themes based on the assumption that they were problematic and manipulated Lively narratives. One of the supposedly manipulated narratives was that when Blake Lively wasn't able to get her way on set or behind the scenes, she involved her husband to create an imbalance of power between her and Justin Baldoni. Ryan Reynolds went so far as to use his power to call agents and agencies, Sony, and other key players so that she would get her way. Mayzlin instructed GPT-4o to include posts that suggest she relied on outside influence, personal relationships, or leverage to secure her way in production matters. Implicit references to favoritism, privilege, or pressure in her favor should also be included. Another supposedly manipulated narrative was that there was a clear, likely motive due to the movie It Ends With Us's value and fan base, in which Lively is attempting to bully her way into buying the rights for It Starts With Us. Mayzlin instructed GPT-4o to count both explicit and implicit commentary suggesting she moved to take over the film. In other words, Mayzlin's purported evidence of manipulation includes a substantial volume of posts that would not be actionable as retaliation even if they were manipulated, because Mayzlin makes no attempt to isolate and solely rely on potentially actionable posts and bases her opinion on much more than such posts. Her opinion about social media manipulation confuses the issue and is irrelevant and unhelpful to the trier of fact. Moreover, it is unduly prejudicial to the extent Mayzlin points her finger at online conduct outside the actionable bounds, and that cannot possibly support any surviving legal claim. Mayzlin's testimony should therefore be excluded under Rule 702, 401, and 403. Mayzlin should not be allowed to opine that defendants harm Lively's consumer brands. Mayzlin's opinion that Lively's consumer brands suffered from defendants' manipulation of social media is premised on her don't know where I went with that, is premised on her opinions that 1. Such manipulation occurred, and 2. But for such manipulation, Lively would not have been the target of negative online commentary. These opinions should be excluded, so Mayzlin's opinion on the downstream effects should be excluded as well. Yeah, because how can she say that had it not been for Wayfarer's manipulation, which still has to be proved, How can she say that Lively would not have been the target of negative online commentary? Uh, it's an impossible thing to prove because there are clearly people who do not like Blake Lively, myself included. In addition, because Mayzlin's manipulation opinion and Mayzlin has not focused solely on the effect of any potentially actionable posts, Mayzlin cannot demonstrate that any damage to Lively's brands was attributable to actionable posts, let alone the extent of such damage. Her opinion is therefore unreliable and unhelpful to the jury. Indeed, courts routinely exclude expert opinion that fails to apportion the alleged harm between actionable and non-actionable conduct. The court should also exclude Mayzlin's brand harm opinion for other reasons. Mayzlin devotes 11 pages of her report to opining that negative online sentiment toward Lively caused a decline in brand equity for Lively's companies. In that section, however, Mayzlin cites virtually nothing other than documents and testimony provided by Lively's companies, including the deposition of a Blake Brown executive and internal reports and presentations from Betty B that discuss consumer surveys, anecdotal summaries of social media posts, and investigations of hostile social media accounts. In doing so, Mayzlin does not apply any expertise. She simply assumes the contents of the documents are true, recites the relevant portions, and says they are consistent with her opinion. That is not permissible expert testimony, it is simply vouching. It is the regurgitation of hearsay, or at best, of documents and testimony that could be introduced through fact witnesses. Yep. An expert should not be permitted to supplant the role of the jury in drawing inferences from documents and testimony, especially where, as here, the inferences are not informed by any specialized technical or scientific knowledge or method. To take just one of Mayzlin's uncritical acceptance of company documents, Mayzlin cites a Blake Brown media impact overview that allegedly shows a pattern of repeat users posting sustained negative commentary over time, and she includes an excerpt of that document that she entitles Examples of Repeat Harassers Persistently Commenting. Despite Mayzlin's reference to a pattern and repeated use of plural nouns, the document shows only a single social media account engaged in repeat hostile posts. Mayzlin's decision to parrot the document's inaccuracies confirms that this sort of testimony is improper under Rules 702 and 403. In essence, she takes a lay document and merely endorses it with the aura of expertise. What's missing is the application of any specialized knowledge on her part. Mayzlin also claims that sales data for Lively's consumer products supports her opinion that online manipulation harmed Lively's brands. As with her prior opinions, however, Mayzlin's analysis of sales data employs no real methodology. It rests entirely on timing, i.e., a decline in sales of Lively's products in or after August 2024, which is inadequate to show causation. As before, Mayzlin made no effort to investigate or rule out alternative causes such as the organic backlash to Lively's promotion of alcohol and hair care brands in connection with a film about domestic violence. Mayzlin's opinion relies on the absence of other external market factors during this period, but she cites no support for that assumption other than redacted. As before, this reliance on client assurances is inadequate for expert testimony. Oh God, they're ripping her a new one here. It is also telling that management attributed their losses to the controversy rather than online manipulation specifically. Other than speculation, Mayzlin provides no basis to conclude that the controversy would not have occurred without online manipulation, or that online manipulation made any substantial contribution. As Mayzlin admits, only 4% of negative posts in August 2024 reflected the purported Wayfarer themes. There is simply too great an analytical gap between the data and the opinion proffered, and as a result, Mayzlin's testimony must be excluded. Oh, goodness. Mayzlin should not be allowed to summarize academic literature or discovery documents. Mayzlin's opinions are unsound, but in addition, her report contains lengthy discussions of subjects that are not appropriate for testimony at trial. First, Mayzlin's report contains a review of the academic literature concerning celebrity reputations and personal brands, as well as online manipulation tactics like algorithmic manipulation, and content suppression. As Mayzlin admits, however, her discussion of specific online tactics is purely theoretical, since she didn't really do an analysis of that subject and didn't look for evidence of any particular tactic. Nor is there any indication that Mayzlin is an expert in most, let alone all, of these tactics. Permitting such testimony would invite speculation from the jury and cause undue prejudice. More generally, expert testimony is not the place to simply parrot the ideas of other experts or individuals that may have some theoretical connection to the case, such as the literature on online manipulation or celebrity branding. Mayzlin's report also discusses various documents produced in discovery that supposedly evidence the manipulation campaign and support her opinions. The jury, however, is perfectly capable of understanding these documents without expert testimony, which would serve only to emphasize their importance. It is inappropriate for experts to act as a vehicle to preserve a factual narrative of interesting or useful documents for a case, in effect simply accumulating and putting together one party's story. Mayzlin should not be permitted to do this if her testimony is admitted at all. Right, so we'll stop there because we're going into another expert. But wow, that was brutal. That was a really brutal takedown of Dina Mayzlin. If she testifies on trial, so you're going to get a flavour now, right? It's just, say, for argument's sake, Lyman says, he rules that no, these experts, they can testify, that's fine, and they can testify on all of these parts or some of these parts, but not this. You're getting a bit of a sense of how Wayfarer will approach them at trial, which I find this so fascinating because we're not going to be there. It's not going to be televised, and it's absolutely fascinating to kind of get a bit of a preview of what kind of questioning Wayfarer are going, and how they're going to attack the credibility of the expert, the credibility of her methodology, the credibility of her opinions. I say her, but obviously this applies to the male ones too. But I love this. I really love this part. So I will come back with a separate video for Aaron Carlotta we'll be doing next. Which I think he's like some kind of social media expert. I'm guessing that just based on this little bit in front of me, but we will find out together. Thanks, guys.